Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy. To rebuild the West, we must first rebuild ourselves. And a big part of that is rebuilding the family structure. In a high agency family, we have strong leadership from a high agency father, and we also have the mother exercising agency in her role. Well, what does it mean to be a high agency mother? Mothers today, they have a lot of work on their plates. There's a tendency we'll see on social media for a lot of women to complain that they're overwhelmed, that they are losing themselves, and that they're finding that being a mother is too hard of a task for them. And they're looking for help. Unfortunately, a lot of the advice that women are given is not really productive, and it's not helping them to address these issues. But today I'm going to be talking with Michelle and Adriana, two mothers with children and who are exercising agency in their own lives and in the way they're raising their children. And we're going to discuss this topic about what advice actually works for mothers and can help them in being a mother and in being happy as well. Welcome, Michelle and Adriana.
Hello, Noah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you guys here. What do you think about that? What do you think about women being overwhelmed with being a mother and with the tasks of being a mother?
Well, it's being a mother is going to require a lot of effort and a lot of work. It's not an easy task, and therefore this is something to be prideful about. You don't want to look down into this motherhood thing. It's actually a very special job that we have to develop and raise the next generation of human beings. So it's a big deal. It's not just raising kids, it's raising a whole new generation. So to be a mother, you really have to build yourself to be strong. That's number one thing, to be mentally stable, to deal with your emotions, because children will bring out a lot of the emotions. They will test you, and you have to be strong to be able to identify that and say, okay, I know that this is just my kids being kids. I have to be strong and know how to deal with those emotions. And unfortunately, the advice that is mostly given is saying, oh, you poor thing. It's showing the empathy, and then there stops. There's no problem solving that really should back that up. I mean, yes, you need to acknowledge that they're going through those emotions that they haven't learned how to manage, but then you have to really go then to the next step, which is, how do I solve this problem? How do I make myself to where I can withstand and manage my emotions better and actually be stronger for my children?
Yeah, on average, women are more emotionally sensitive, and that's important so that they can sense the emotions of little children. And, a child that can't speak, that's pre-verbal, all he has is emotional displays in order to communicate. So, women have to be sensitive to that. And I think that often there's this dichotomy. To be strong, I will cut my emotions off. And that's how society thinks you be strong. But a woman can't lose her emotional sensitivity, yet she still has to be strong to deal with her children's emotions. If the kid's having a breakdown and the mother has a breakdown as well, that's not helping the kid very much. It's kind of the same when, we talk about men keeping frame in order to be an emotional anchor for their women. Well, the women have to keep frame to be an emotional anchor for their children. And it's the advice either seems to be completely indulge your emotions or cut them off, which are just two ends of a low agency spectrum of not having management of the emotions. You're either not dealing with them by indulging them or not dealing with them by cutting them off.
Right. And biologically, we are supposed to be built that way, because that way we can be able to communicate with our children, because they're very immature, right? They don't have they don't know how to manage their emotions. So in a way, it's us getting to their level so that we can have a better understanding and build a stronger bond. But there seems to be a disconnect when women get emotional. It all of a sudden, it just becomes all about them. They forget that there's beings that they're taking care of, and they need to be on par with their own needs, not below. And when you if it becomes all about you, then you're basically ignoring your kids at that moment. So you have to figure out a way to where you don't get into that path where you think it's all about you and start forgetting about what's more important, your children. Because once you have children, they become more important because they need you. They cannot be independent at the point. You have to teach them that independence, but for the most part, they're dependent on you 100%, 24/7.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when women are describing being overwhelmed with the tasks of mothering, it's not necessarily the tasks of mothering itself that's overwhelming them. It's auxiliary things that sometimes they have to do because of the way their life is set up, and sometimes they're unnecessary tasks. And you'll see this from a lot of women who are, for example, working full time and also being mothers. It can be overwhelming to them, and it's not the motherhood necessarily that's overwhelming them. It's the other tasks they have. And then sometimes it's an issue of, if you have babies can be kind of almost overwhelming. I have twins, and they're a little over a year old, and it can be pretty exhausting. They wake up during the night, and since there's two of them, that's twice as many awakenings during the night. But they're only babies for a short period of time. I know, I've talked to coached women, and they have teenage daughters and our teenage sons, and they're saying, well, I'm doing this, and I have all this laundry, and I have all this cleaning and other stuff to do. And I asked them, and okay, so what tasks can you delegate to your children? Oh, it's going to take me so much effort to teach my kids to put away the laundry properly that it's easier to just do it myself. That ends up being a impossible cycle to maintain. And I think part of showing agency as a mother is offloading the tasks onto the children that the children are capable of doing, because that's part of teaching them agency as well.
Yeah, being a perfectionist is going to work against you no matter what. I mean, you can strive to improvements, but don't exaggerate to the point where you're imagining. I don't know. I think when people say a mother is being a good homemaker, and they imagine some point in our era where an exceptional homemaker has everything under control, but you got to remember that during those times, it was safe to send your kids to school, so you didn't have your kids at home. And so you had that free time to maybe manage your house 100%. But right now we're in a situation where homeschooling is actually now part of raising your kids. So your kids are going to be around you most of the time. So you have to set up yourself kind of like in a way, like if you were from you're farmers, families that were farmers, basically everyone got involved in the whole process of farming. Children would help with milking the cows or feeding the chickens. And so we have to go back to that mentality where every member of the household knows what they're supposed to be doing and be learning the skills for being independent, like when they become an adult.
Yeah, my great grandmother, she had quite a few sisters and sisters-in-law because she was one of 16 children. And so what she said was, in their era, the mothers would form, basically, they'd pool their resources together. So where they lived, there were no public schools. They were on farms out in the prairies of Canada. And so they were too far from the city to send the kids to school on a regular basis. And so what happened was some mothers, they were, this is Wednesday. Okay, that's these three ladies. They're going to do all the cooking and the minding of children. So any kid that was past nursing age was off running with his brothers and sisters and cousins off onto that other family. And any kid that was old enough would have been working with his father and his uncles and the rest of the family. And I think that was actually a better environment for children when they had things to do. Kids get in trouble now because they don't have enough things to do that are positive. And that's, if you're a child, my son says this to me all the time. I don't really want to watch a screen. He says, I'd rather, do something. Can you give me a job? I'd like to earn some money. And that's very difficult, I think, for people living in the cities now with all the laws against child labor. But if we can find productive things for our kids to do, and those are often chores around the house, whatever it happens to be, something productive, it's going to make it a lot easier for the mother, but it's also going to make it, it makes the family a team rather than the mother a servant. And that allows her to focus not on the mechanics of being a mother, but more on the teaching. It's women that mostly teach culture, since they have children until they're at least 7 or 8 years old. They're the number one influence. And if you're homeschooling, they might be the number one influence until the child is a teenager and starts wanting to do more and more things with the father. And so that the less time you can spend on the mechanical part, and the more on the teaching and raising of the children part, I think this helps a lot for the mothers to not feel overwhelmed.
Right. I think a lot of that is them feeling alone, because they really are. If you analyze that, we had in our Western culture, we have issues with employment. And so what we've had is husbands just pretty much move from job to job wherever the work is. And that meant that your family moved away from the extended family. And so now you're alone in another state, starting all over again, not knowing anyone. And that's where you feel most overwhelmed, when you feel like you're alone and you don't have someone to at least talk to as well. Because when you talk to somebody about the same things, then you kind of feel like, okay, I got that off my chest. Now I can continue and help my family with the rest. But I think that's part of the problem, is feeling alone. And so what I suggest is you have to have courage. You really do. You have to step outside of your comfort zone and start reaching out for other mothers who are on the same boat, because you're gonna be surprised at how many other mothers are on the same thing, feeling alone away from their extended family. And so you have to reach out and make your connections, because that will make you feel like, okay, I can ask a favor every now and then. And that's you're building your community again, because you're away from extended family. So you kind of have to build your community, people that you can trust and share those burdens every now and then.
Yeah, I think even being in that group just for conversation, even if they can't be people who are physically close to you, um, the advantage is it normalizes your situation. You talk to someone else and you say, hey, they went through the same thing. Maybe they're 5 years farther along the path than you are. And they'll say, oh, yeah, I went through this thing and this is how I resolved it. And that can help you a lot. It is surprising that there is almost nowhere for women to learn the household management part of being a wife and a mother. And that often is really the part that's stressing them. It's not the children themselves, it's that household management. And being around other women is traditionally how they learned it, not just from their mother. Their mother would have a way of doing it, but they would also learn from other women, from their sisters, from their aunts. And so it would give them different ways to solve problems. And that chain of knowledge has been broken, and women can rebuild that again. I'm often talking to men about rebuilding community and brotherhoods, but I think it's also important for women.
Absolutely, because one of the things you can do, for example, when you're comfortable and you have those connections, and you basically feel it's safe for me to drop off my children with this other mother so that they can have a play date. I mean, in 1 hour play date, while they're watching your kid and your kid is entertained with their kids, you can pretty much take care of something in the household. So that's why I'm saying that don't be by yourself. You really have to get out of your comfort zone and make connections with other moms, and be open-minded to their suggestions, and also be aware of weird things as well. You see, we're the protectors of children, so we also have to make sure that these people are not going to do some harm, to the way our children need to think.
I think, if I may add, I think a lot of the isolation, even pre-pandemic, I've noticed in young women, maybe not necessarily moving interstate with their husbands, but let's say single moms, the amount of pressure that young women feel to be a perfect mom. What should I do? How should I go about do it? Where do I go if I need the assistance? They feel very isolated, because when they're alone with their child, the baby being so young requires their attention 24/7. They have no way of really maintaining the relationships with people who don't have children. Usually it's a case of, well, somebody's having a child and they step away from the friends who don't have children because the lifestyle is very different. So making the effort um, to just taking the time to ease into motherhood, because like Adriana said, it really is a real sacred passage, to be able to have children, to be able to raise them and imprint on them that will change things in the future. Learning how to become a mother and navigating into it, not only intuitively, but practical matters, will help you in the long run. And the one thing I notice with children too is after that infant stage comes, they want to learn things. They want to engage in, if you're using the broom to sweep the kitchen, oh, can I have the broom? They want to sweep. They're sweeping the same spot, for 3 minutes. But they are learning it. They want to. And I think with a lot of moms who are a little bit more isolated, they sometimes don't recognize the transition that their children make from not being able to do something to wanting to go and do it because it's not up to the mother's standards. I want to clean, I want to get this done. So learning patience and cultivating patience is a big key component to that as well.
Yeah, both of you mentioned the fear, the FUD they call it, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that surrounds a lot of new mothers, and sometimes not so new mothers. It sometimes never goes away. And I've talked to women from communities where they have a lot of children, and where that's the only, for example, Mennonites, and that's the only place they end up going is that's all that women do, is have children usually. So it's taken like a career. It's taken very seriously, and there's a lot of training for women, and they don't have that fear, uncertainty, and doubt because their society prepares them properly for it. And I think for a lot of mothers, recognizing that society didn't prepare you for it, but that it is not impossible for you to learn. This is not beyond what you can learn. You were made to do this. And then going, and whether it's finding an older woman to be your mentor or whatever, and starting to go through the process of learning, it can remove a lot of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And having that normalization of your experience of becoming a mother is going to make it a lot easier. Sometimes the fear itself of, am I going to do this perfectly? I mean, even for my first child, I was trying to make everything perfect. The perfect setup for the bedroom, the perfect setup for the kid to play on, the perfect things to stimulate them. And now that I've got 3 of them, it's just like, as long as they're not killing each other, everything is cool. We're gonna continue. When kid falls down, bumps his head, the first time the kid bumps its head, you're like, oh my God, I hope they're okay. After the 500th time that they fall down and bump their head, you're like, yeah, you just kind of glance in their direction. Unless they scream real loud, you don't look. And if you do, you just kind of glance in their direction and make sure they're not bleeding. And then up they get and they run around. That normalization of what, kids go through a lot of things that look like the end of the world and might have been 200 years ago, before modern medicine, but it can be real scary. Your kid gets a baby gets a random nosebleed, and you can freak out. And then you realize they just stuck their sharp little fingernail in their nose and cut themselves by accident, and it's no big deal. So that initial fear, that goes away with time. And I think knowing that you're going to go through it, kind of like knowing you're going to go over the edge of a roller coaster, it can take some of that uncomfortable edge off it and make it a lot easier to deal with.
Right. That's good advice that you said in the beginning about young women reaching out to older women with older kids, because we've been through it. We're not going to criticize you. We're actually going to share the tools and skills that we learned along the way, because we went through it already, and we know. And plus, we also know that there are some things you got to learn on your own so that you learn them properly, because it's not good either to just give them everything to avoid every mistake. Because sometimes you learn from your mistakes, so you got to allow them to have that freedom to make certain mistakes to learn something properly. but guide them enough so that they have confidence, so that they have the confidence to face anything new, for example, that they don't have experience with. So yeah, I think that's good. And the thing is, one of the things that I see is social skills. A lot of women don't have very good social skills, and so that's why they feel embarrassed, or they feel like they can't really get out of their comfort zone and talk to other people. And the thing is, have a journal, and write down what things look at yourself and say, what are the things that I need to improve on so that I can be a good guide for my children. And then you look for people that you find out through your outings or whatever. Oh, this person has very good social skills. Let me make friends with her and learn how she learned how to be good with socially. So the thing is, you're not going to find that one person who has every skill set. You need to find different women and make different connections so that you can pull those skill sets that you want for yourself.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the journal. If I can add to that, when new moms are asking themselves, what can I improve on? Instead of taking a social perspective of what is considered acceptable, look in your home, look at your relationship with your child or with your children. Let that be a guide. If we always tend to have one child that's more challenging and one child that's more easygoing. You're not going to treat your children the same way. But let's say you are having issues with a challenging child who's maybe not listening a lot. Look to that to see where you can improve. Look at the problems or the frustrations that you're having and go from there, as opposed to looking to society saying, this is the kind of mom that I should be. Because you want to stay focused with what works well in your home, because not all children are the same, not all parents are the same, not all parenting styles are the same. So you have to find the abilities and the limitations within your own home to say, you know what, this child of mine requires a little bit more connection. Perhaps they are a little bit more emotional. Your other child might be a bit more independent, might not need as much attention. So you have to adjust and let the emotional compass, that uncomfortable struggle that you feel with that child, let that be your compass to guide where you need to improve.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You mentioned about the social expectations, and a lot of people's expectations of what should be a mother or a family or interaction between parents and children come from television. Since apparently the average North Americans watches like 20 hours a week of television or something like this. So that means we have this pseudo socialization with not real people on TV, except the entire objective of TV is to entertain you through an excess of drama and emotions. And, everything is a hyper realist or a hyper hyped up version of reality. It's not actual reality. But the natural human tendency is then to copy what we just saw. When monkey see, monkey do, we tend to do that as humans. If we're copying the way that people are parenting on TV, we're going to have problems. There's not really any character on TV that's being raised right. We don't have Leave It to Beaver on TV anymore. We have now programs where it's not for that pro-social purposes. And even the when we see in public how people apparently are parenting their children, we're not necessarily seeing what went before that. So we can see this kid that's really well behaved and the parents don't need to do much and everything is going good. Well, we don't see how they help the child along to that point. And we don't see how they behave at home. Maybe they're really well behaved in public and not at home, or vice versa. And so you're absolutely right. Look at the child's individual needs and try to figure out it's a problem solving process. And, it's a problem solving process with human beings. And that is really women's specialty, is their ability to solve humanistic problems between people. And so it really is right up, if you're a woman, this is right up your alley of what you were designed or intended to do. And so a lot of younger women, they have that fear that it's going to be difficult, and it's really what they're made to do. It's going to be doable, not easy, but doable.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, it's not easy and doable. You're correct. And the thing is, and the baby years are probably the most difficult stage, because they do need you a lot more, obviously. And if you weren't prepared for that, it's going to be even more exhausting. But it goes by really quick. I think that period is they need your attention full time. If anything, if you need to reset yourself, then maybe join a blog or something to where you can, text, not necessarily make real connections, but kind of text, say, oh yeah, it was really tough getting my kid to sleep last night or whatever. At least you know that you're not alone in that stage. But they do require all your attention at that point. It's not a good time to socialize with other moms just yet, because they need you first. And so, but you have to realize that you'll be getting out of that stage, and not very many years down the road. And then you're ready to the next step, which is socialize more with other moms, and with the purpose of having future play dates, right, where their kids can play with your kids, and so on. But like I said, it's being aware of the different stages. Is you got to focus 100% here, and then later on you have to kind of make your children more independent, have them learn how to dress themselves, learn how to keep things tidy, learn, all these things, so that when they're teenagers, they already know all this stuff. You shouldn't be waiting till they're teenagers to teach them how to cook or teach them how to, do other things around the house. They should already know by age 12 how to do all those things. So they have to keep in mind that after they're done with being babies, you have to think about their developmental stage and say, what's appropriate for a toddler, right? What things can I teach this toddler at that point to be independent? Then move to the elementary years, and then upper elementary years, and middle school. And so, and it gets easier when you set it up that way. Then you're not worried about all these things. They actually offer their help. They're like, Mom, what can I help you with this today? And you're like, you know what? That'd be great, because I had this other thing I had to do, and that would pretty much overwhelm me. So, like I said, you have to be a problem solver. You need to know how to delegate some tasks to your children, but do it in a way, not in a authoritative, where you need to do this. Let's keep a chart of things you must do. Not like that, but more of, these are skill sets that are going to benefit you, in the future. This is for your benefit. These are things that will help you along the way. And you give examples of adults, like college children. They're still children in some way, but they're young adults that don't know how to do these things. And when you tell them these adults don't know how to do these things, they're like, oh, really? That is something. And that makes them want to learn them more. That makes them say, wow, I can do something that adults don't know how to do. So they get excited. And when they get excited, that's when you have to take that opportunity to teach them as much as they're willing to want to learn.
Yeah, you talked about something important there with the attitude that you display, and I think this is essential for parenting, for mothers, that they demonstrate the attitude to the children that motherhood is a joy for them. Even if some tasks might be difficult, it might be stressful, it is itself a joy. And not only that, but also even the things that go around motherhood. I remember when I got married, my wife had a phobia almost of vacuuming. She would sweep everything, even on the carpet. It's like, you can't clean the carpet by sweeping. You're going to have to pull out the vacuum. And I said, why is the vacuum bothering you so much? And she says, well, every time my mom would vacuum, she would swear and mutter under her breath and be angry, and because she hated vacuuming. And she says, eventually we dug it out that she hated my wife hated vacuuming as well, because of having that stress response connected to the sound of the vacuum from her mother really being unhappy that she had to vacuum. And so, as parents, if we're going around to our kids saying, oh, it's so hard to be a mother, oh, it's so much stress, oh, this is so difficult, and then we wonder why, especially our daughters grow up not wanting children, we've conditioned them that this is a terrible and difficult thing. And even for our own sake, as parents, if we focus on the joys of parenting and we remind ourselves how much, oh, I enjoy this, I enjoy that, I'll do, I got twins, so my wife can't possibly do all of the childcare. What if there's food that needs to be fed to that one and the other one needs his diaper changed? You can't do both at the same time. So when I'm changing one of their diapers, this is not a pleasant task. But to see how happy they are, now they're starting to speak, the twins, and they're like, Dada, do it, Dada, do it. And they're so happy and it brings me joy that I'm doing something for them. And then afterwards, they'll give me a big hug and they'll express their joy that I'm taking care of them. For parents, and I think especially for mothers, since the age between 0 and about 7 years old is when you start developing your attitudes towards things. Showing a positive attitude towards family tasks and chores is going to set the kids up, not just the mechanics of teaching them how to clean up after themselves and do these things, but how to view it, what attitude to have towards it. This is really going to help the kids to have a high level of agency. If we can control our emotional response to the things that we have to do, those things become easier, but it also makes it easier for the people that are observing us, for the little people, for the children.
Yeah, I think when you first have your children, you feel that sense of overwhelm, and sometimes it's a radical life change. I know before I had my own children, I was very spontaneous. You call me up in the afternoon and say, hey, tomorrow morning we're flying out, pack your bag and your passport, and I'm gone. When I was pregnant with my first child, I had to learn to really slow down. And I found many days towards the end of my pregnancy and within that first year of having my child very frustrated because there was not enough activity. I was in some way bored. I felt in some way alone. It was a radical change where I felt almost like having the imposter syndrome. Like, this isn't me. This isn't my life. I don't know what I'm doing here, and I don't know how to do it. And when I go back to thinking about here's this little human being and that it is a sacred rite of passage, we also have to think that ultimately what we as women and as mothers are capable of is being in service to others. And when you look at a little baby that's so fragile and so innocent and so beautiful and holds your finger and has the first little smile or the giggle, you can't help but feel like these moments are worth all the frustrations that one can feel being a new mom. I think flexibility and acceptance of the position that you're in, that you are now a mom, whether you had planned it or not, because there's not much difference about whether you plan a child or whether your child was, let's say, a surprise, a blessing in disguise. The notions of becoming a mom are the same because it is a change for anybody. And being of service also will require some boundaries for yourself, knowing your limitations and being able to take a step back and I don't want to say planning, but having some foresight into what do I need to do to get into a state of mind where I feel healthier, where my emotional mindset is not run down. I had a point in here somewhere, but I think I forgot. Acceptance and being of service to others in that regard.
Yeah, there's something interesting about accepting that this isn't. If you're about to go to a task and it's going to be difficult, and you say, "Yeah, this is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to get through it." It's a lot easier to do that task than if you come to it looking for everything to complain about and not fully accepting that it will be difficult. Accepting our burdens, accepting reality for what it is really the start of having agency.
Right, right.
I wanted to add to something that Michelle was saying about being of service. That's what I mean when you're a mother. It's not about you anymore. It's about your children, because we we grew these beings inside our body. So in reality, these children are an extension of ourselves. And so we need to, when we are struggling inside ourselves, but our children are happy, then that's a good opportunity to say, okay, I need to reset. I need to find something to ground myself so that I don't lose it, right? But if your child is struggling at the moment, they're frustrated, that's not the time for you to lose yourself within yourself. This is your chance to say, they're because they're younger than us, they're more mature, they come first. So that's the difference, is their children come first because they need you. They cannot take care of themselves. You need to be a service to them first. And then once they're happy and calm and whatever, then you can take care of you. It's kind of like that oxygen mask on the airplane. They say, well, they say you have to put on your mask first, obviously, because if you don't put on your mask first, you can't take care of your children, right? But in this instance, you're not in that situation. So you do need to take care of them first, because if you don't, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose it because they're going to be in some kind of, what's it called, tantrum or whatever. And they're going to be screaming, and they're going to be triggering certain emotions in you that you really probably are not capable of managing yet. And so the thing is, if you just turn that off for just a moment and say, it's not about me, it's about them, because they need me. They're a precious thing that I grew inside of me. You start to extend that empathy towards them now, not towards yourself yet, but towards the children first. And you have that empathy and say, they can't help it. They need me. They're my children. I had them in me all for 9 months. And this is, they still need me. They can't manage on their own. So you have to not be selfish at that point. You have to say, I'm giving myself to them. I'm at their service. And once they're good and happy, then you can say, okay, now I can switch that other thing back on and take care of me next. So that's the difference. Is I see that a lot of moms cannot turn off that switch, and you're gonna have to learn how to do that. So the other thing I wanted to address is that journal. That journal is good to document not the skills that you want to have, but the things to work on yourself. Part of that is self-knowledge, is noticing what are the things that make you lose it. What are the things where you're supposed to be patient, but you kind of get impatient, and kind of think about where that's coming from. Maybe there's something in your childhood that implemented that I guess dysfunction in you, because in reality, we're supposed to be very patient people. And not only that, but what makes you angry, or what makes you be depressed. So you have to write those things down so that you can problem solve those as well. Because if you are strong in your mind, you can pretty much tackle everything else, really. No matter what your children throw at you, you'll be in a mindset where, like, okay, I see that they're kids. They're not trying to get me. They're not evil. They're just kids, and they don't know how to manage these things. And so it's up to me to be the strong one and mature one to handle the situation properly, to where you're not damaging them, because a lot of times not knowing what to do actually creates more damage. And you have to be careful, because once you do some damage, add some dysfunction into them, that's going to manifest itself in another way. Okay, they might have issues with depression or any other, or social, or not being able to build good relationships. So you have to be on top of it. You have to study. You have to learn all these skills. You have to have knowledge. And if you can't do it yourself, again, reach out to others who can help you and have this knowledge.
So we've been talking about what mothers can do. And I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the period of preparation for motherhood. A lot of people think this happens between the moment you get pregnant and the moment the child is born. Historically, we started preparing women for motherhood from about the time that they had their first menses. So that means teaching them the things they need to know and helping them with the attitude as well as the practical skills. Let's talk about, for the next little bit, let's talk to younger women who want eventually to become mothers. about what they can do to prepare themselves. And, practical skills is one thing that you can learn. You can learn how to cook from a cookbook. You can learn how to clean from a YouTube video. But you can't learn, as you mentioned, Adriana, how, your internal triggers. You're not going to watch a YouTube video that helps you get rid of your internal triggers. This is going to come from other types of processes. And so what are the kinds of things that younger women that are thinking about having children, what can they do? Maybe they're not even married yet, but they know that one day they want to have their own children. How can they start working towards being a high agency mother now? What kind of advice would you give them?
One of the pieces of advice I would give is get involved in environments with children. So if you have perhaps nieces or nephews, younger cousins, babysitting, I think would have a big advantage, and maybe even volunteering in your community in daycare centers and really getting a feel for what children can be like day in and day out. Obviously, you're not going to have them 24/7 for years, but I think that this is a very healthy approach to recognizing the different phases of what children can go through in a day.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent piece of advice. And one of the great things about it is it helps you to know where your triggers are. And you're going to find out, some people are triggered by loud children. Some people are triggered by, little things that kids do. Kids will intentionally, if you don't give them enough attention, they'll poke you and try to get attention, not always through positive ways. And they're not trying to be bad. They want attention and they're experimenting how they can get it. But when you spend time around kids, they're going to hit those little triggers and you're going to find out the areas where you have some weaknesses, where you have some places that maybe an adult doesn't trigger it, but a child triggers some trauma from your childhood. And so you end up responding in a less than ideal way. Now, when you're in small contact with the kids, you're looking after, you're just maybe at first holding the kid with their parents or babysitting a kid for a couple of hours. You can feel that trigger, but because it's not enough time for the kid to really get under your skin, or it's not really the kid's fault, it's your own trigger's fault, but not enough time to really hit that trigger, but you'll feel it. And we've talked about taking a diary, write that down and start. There is processes. This is actually what I do in the course for agency that is in the link that you can see. It's in the link below this video. And if you're watching this on Periscope, once the video is done, I'm going to post the link on Twitter below this. Join me on Twitter and you can see the link. You'll learn how to go into your mind and remove those triggers and how to rebuild parts of you that have been traumatized strong enough that when you become a mother, it's a much easier task. I think for a lot of women that are really suffering as mothers is because they were barely functional before they got pregnant. Then they became mothers, and it was one more thing on top of what they were already stressed out about. And now they have to process childhood trauma of their own while trying to avoid giving their own kids trauma. And that is a really tough task. That is a lot harder than just being a mother. And even as a father, you can go through that. But for mothers, that's really powerful. If you have a way or a process or access to help to process all of those things before you have children, your life's going to be a lot easier.
Correct. And actually, Michelle, that's a good suggestion on being around children, because people who are not parents, they have a difficult time imagining themselves as parents. That's kind of like an unknown, and it's hard for them to relate. So once they see children, or around children, they get encouraged, but sometimes they get discouraged too, because they feel, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this, right? So the thing is, that's a good thing to have when they're ready. But I would also suggest that they work on their minds, learn, read books. It's important. Read books about child psychology, about developmental stages. You want to be reading about homeschooling. What's that about? So you have to strengthen your mind, because when you strengthen your mind, you can handle everything else. Trust me, you do. It's amazing how that works. And the thing is, for women, because of the sexual market value, they will, when they're not mothers or not even married, their whole focus is on their looks, as they should be, because that's what how they sell themselves is that they focus on that, and so they're not really learning the other things. So this is why I say you have to be reading the books. You have to work on your mind. That's really important, because you will realize when you exercise your mind, you say, oh, there's some things about myself that I didn't focus on, and I can say that I'm not as patient as I thought I was, or, and that's why it's important that you exercise your mind, read books, read articles. If that's hard for you, then be around people who already have done the research, and they can help you learn these things. And again, with having a journal to keep track of the things you're working on. And Noah, you're a great coach for these people that don't have a spouse or children, to work on themselves and ensure that they have the knowledge they need to take the next steps. Because in reality, what you need to focus is building relationships. That's really the basis of everything. You need to know that to be able to find a spouse. And then the building relationship is the next step is to be able to deal with your children, because it's, again, relationships, that and deep relationships. And a lot of people are not good at that. They don't know their children. And so that's what you need to work on, is how to build deep, meaningful relationships, first with your spouse and then with your children eventually.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned strengthening your mind. And so people have different concepts about what that is. And there is two parts to that. One is to actually make your mind stronger itself. And the other is to shed the things that are holding you down that aren't productive. So if you're very, very strong, but you walk around all the time in shackles, chained down, pulling weight behind you, that'll make you stronger, but you're also not going to be able to perform. You're not going to be able to do the things you need to do in life, and you'll be exhausted all the time. Most people who find themselves always exhausted, it's not the things they're doing now in their life. It's that shackle and chains that they have on them, that were put on them sometimes in their childhood or in the past, that's holding them down, that is making it hard for them to act in their current life. And you can be real strong. These people say, but I'm so strong, but I'm also exhausted, and I'm tired of being exhausted. They need to shed those chains, and then they're going to realize how strong they actually are. And that's why it's so important, the development of agency. Part of what you get when you develop agency is you get the ability to understand how to shed things from your life that you don't need. Bad habits, vices, bad attitudes, inappropriate programming, things that you believed, or ways of behaving that worked when you were a child that might have been necessary. A very good example of that is that many children who are going through trauma learn to disassociate. And what that means for those who don't know is they learn to essentially turn off their brain, and they can still mechanically go through the functions of what they need to do, but they turn off the brain. They don't remember what's happening much when they disassociate, and they're not really connected to anything. When children are undergoing trauma, for example, if they're listening to their parents fight, or if they're being abused in some way, that is a survival tactic. It can keep them alive as children. But once you learn that, you then bring that into your adult life. If you haven't reprogrammed yourself to stop disassociating, now it's going to be very easy when you're stressed out from dealing with life and children and the home to tend to disassociate, perhaps into screens, perhaps into your own imagination, to disassociate and not make the connection that you need with your children in order to build the relationship to the point where the children are sufficiently mature that now they don't need constant hand-holding, helping them to grow up and become a productive part of the family. And so we have to, all throughout our life, be constantly looking at our programming and say, that worked for that moment because that's how I survived that trauma. It's not working now. What do I need to do to change it? And the earlier on that we can change these behaviors, the better it turns out for us, because it's easier to fix problems closer to their root than after we've suffered with them for many time. This is why I always tell people the best time to fix your problems is yesterday, and the next best time is today. So that's what we actually have, is today, to fix them. And it's for women who are thinking about becoming a mother, that's exactly what I would encourage. Contact me. I will put you in touch with the right course for you, the right program for you, to help dig out all of those traumas, and not just to talk about them. That's what you do in therapy. You talk and talk and talk about your problems. In coaching, you strengthen yourself. You get rid of what's holding you back, and you strengthen yourself so that you don't repeat that trauma in the next generation.
Correct. Definitely acquiring self-knowledge is key. And yes, Noah, you're the right person to guide people on how to get there. If anyone needs help with homeschooling, or I also do Montessori and also peaceful parenting, contact me at homeschoollife.net. I can definitely help you with that if you're at that stage, for sure. But the self-knowledge, you cannot ignore that. You really need to analyze yourself, because that will take you to where you need to be in the future.
Absolutely. And I'll put your link down below, Adriana, after the video's over.
Thank you.
The
Go
other
ahead,
thing
Michelle.
I'd
Go
like to
ahead.
add to young women who are looking to become moms, take a look at your standards for your life. Sometimes looking at the past, into our own childhood, and recognizing what we didn't like. For example, with my own mother, she didn't have the ability to really listen to other people's feelings. This is something that I really struggled with growing up. So one of the standards I made for myself when I have my own children is to make sure that they feel heard, even if I don't agree with the outcome that they want, or they can't sway me, but I want them to feel heard. Look at the standards that you'd like to have for yourself, even if it's coming from your past, and how would you want things to be different. There's a fine line between setting standards and then projecting your own trauma and trying to heal through the relationship with your children. I think that's a different topic, but definitely have a look at your standards. What would you want your life to be, and what do you need to do to get there? And this is where I agree, where Adriana and Noah are huge advocates. We homeschool as well, and I've had coaching sessions as well, and they've made a tremendous difference in just bettering life, where we all have blind spots, and if we don't have the right people around us to show us those blind spots, then we hinder ourselves and we're not making progress that way. So
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And we're coming around the end of our time now. And I would like to thank Michelle and Adriana for coming on with us today and talking about this important subject. If you're a mother out there and you're looking for help, contact me. You can message me through YouTube, through Periscope, or through Twitter, or go to the website, noahrevoy.com, and that will take you to one of my websites. It will redirect you, and you can use any of the forms there to contact me. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you very much for listening. We're going to keep coming back with these group topics and talking about it with a group. And if you'd like to be in a future session, that's another good reason to contact me. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye. Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.